This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Lenovo IdeaPad Slim 7. I believe overseas it's going to be called the Yoga 7, or is. So this is pretty exciting. This is the year of AMD. They're rising up. Sorry, I couldn't resist the pun. It has AMD Ryzen 2 inside, otherwise known as Renoir, otherwise known as the Ryzen 4000 series U-series CPUs that really rock. Besides that, it's very slim, metal chassis, nice build. You know, with Lenovo, the 7 series is pretty high. There's a 9 series above it. That's the most expensive and fancy pants, but this is often where the meat is for a lot of people, getting a really nice build quality and good specs, but without spending, you know, $1,500 or $2,000. In fact, with AMD inside, this one is list price of $900, and you might find it a little cheaper at retailers. Now, there is an Intel version as well, and that one is $1,050, but we're just looking at the AMD one. We're going to look at it now. So this is a 14-inch Ultrabook. It's a conventional laptop design clamshell. It doesn't do the 360-degree thing or anything like that. In fact, it doesn't even have a touchscreen. It has a very pleasing full HD IPS glossy display, though. And we'll talk about the display quality a bit, but it's pretty darn nice, especially for the price. Inside, we have an AMD Ryzen series 4700U. That's an 8-core 8-thread CPU, which is a lot in an Ultrabook. That's what AMD's been doing this year. They have really been blowing the top off of performance thanks to their 7-nanometer architecture that has less heat, it uses less power, all those good things. Now, interestingly, ours actually has the Ryzen 7 4800U and not the 7 4700U, so we get a little bit more performance and a little bit more heat. The 4700 might actually be better heat-wise. RAM is soldered on here, and it is phenomenally fast. You can see the specs on screen because AMD does really fast RAM. Soldered on, 8 gigs is what I see on Lenovo's site right now, but our particular unit has 16 gigs, so I'm hoping that'll be available for you power users out there who might want it. And there's the usual M.2 NVMe SSD slot, and you get 512 gig SSD for that $900 price tag. Ours is a SK Hynix one, and the benchmark's pretty well, so I'm fine with that. Also, what's nice is, besides the fact that Ryzen's typically really good on battery life, as long as you're doing, you know, light to moderate work. Let's be fair here. You're not trying to play Skyrim or edit video or something like that, but, you know, your average, normal, light, business, personal kind of use. We have a 60.7 watt-hour battery inside, which is pretty darn big for a 14-inch Ultrabook. It's also quite light, 3 pounds, which is 1.4 kilograms, and how thin is it? 14.9 millimeters. Yet they do find room for some legacy ports here, like USB-A ports. You get 2 of those. We have USB-C, 2 of them. No Thunderbolt 3 on the AMD version. I'm probably hailing back to the fact that that was Intel's intellectual property, though now it's opening up to everybody. If you do go with the Intel version of this, you do get Thunderbolt 3. Anyway, 2 ports. One of them is used by the 65-watt charger, well, when you need to charge it. Of course, you have a headphone jack on board as well. Oh, and you also get HDMI and a micro SD card slot. So for something this thin and light, it's got all the ports that you could need to actually get work done or get schoolwork done. Pretty nice stuff. Build quality on this is very good. It's rigid, it's metal. The color that we have is the only color that's available, so that's fine. The display on this, again, it's full HD. It's an IPS type of display, and it's quite good. They claim 300 nits. We actually measured a little bit above that. You can see the metrics on screen. Contrast is better than average on this, and the color gamut is pretty respectable, especially in this price range. To see, you know, when you're pushing 80 to 84% for Adobe RGB and P3 color gamut. Subjectively speaking, it looks very nice. It is glossy. There's some glare, but it's not hideously glossy. The laptop has a Windows Hello IR camera and this interesting presence detection thing that it does. It's not the first time we've seen this on laptops, so if you walk away it dims, if you walk close it wakes up, and then hopefully it'll use the Windows IR camera to, well, log you in. Lenovo often does a good job with audio, and while this might not have a fancy rotating soundbar, it does have up-firing stereo speakers that surround the keyboard, and they're surprisingly loud and full, actually. They're quite good. Great for watching movies, certainly. The keyboard on this is your typical Ultrabook short travel. It's not a ThinkPad, folks, but it's not too bad. It has a nice key return to it that makes it feel responsive, crisp, and firm without being harsh on your fingertips. We have a Microsoft Precision trackpad on board as well. Okay, so that's all the basics. What about the performance on this and that Ryzen CPU inside? It is crazy. Just even if you just look at the benchmarks, let alone real world use on this thing, the benchmarks look more like a 6 to 8 core Intel 45-watt CPU you would find on a gaming laptop or a mobile workstation. That's the level of performance that we're seeing out of these Ryzen CPUs. And this is a 15-watt Ultrabook CPU with Radeon graphics. The Radeon graphics are pretty good, too. If you go with the Intel version, they give you a MX350 NVIDIA low-end dedicated GPU there. Well, this one benchmarks ever so slightly higher than the average for that NVIDIA MX350 just on the Radeon graphics. So it's all very good. So if you're looking for 14 Ultrabook that can do a little bit more than the usual stuff you might think of, like Office, web surfing, Zoom calls, streaming video, this can do it. The only caveat is because it's so thin, 14.9 millimeters, even though it has two fans inside. When you're pushing it really hard, and you can see here on the benchmark graph where it goes into the more CPU-intensive parts, this thing will hit the thermal ceiling. We're talking 101 centigrade. Now, under normal use, it doesn't get nearly that hot. The CPU core temperatures are absolutely fine, 40s, 50s, sometimes 30s, but don't get this thinking you're going to cheat your way into getting the equivalent of a Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Extreme, because it's not built to take that kind of heat for 8 hours on end or 4 hours on end if you get my drift. But it has enough power there and enough spiking and oomph that if you do need to do some videos. A lot of people now are doing videos for presentations or for school, that sort of thing. You got the horsepower here, where usually on an Ultrabook video editing, especially if you get to 4K, can be a little slow and tedious. Battery life on this is, well, you might guess good, because AMD 7nm CPU is very efficient, and we have a, relatively speaking, quite large battery for a 14-inch Ultrabook. And the Lenovo always has these crazy claims, like 17.5 hours of battery life or something. Obviously, real world, you're never going to see that sort of thing. But I actually got through a complete workday with this. That means from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., never shutting the laptop off, letting it sleep occasionally, sure, but so yeah, you can do 8 to 9 hours with this, a light to moderate use. Again, if you are editing video or doing Skyrim play or something like that, then obviously it's going to be shorter, but that's another win there. And probably the Intel one isn't going to be quite as good with the Intel 10th Gen CPU, so we don't have it in for review, so I can't say that for sure. To take off the bottom cover, just unscrew the Torx T5 screws. They're all visible, nothing hiding under the rubber strips or anything like that, and pry it off. And it has some tenacious rubber clips attached to that metal bottom cover, particularly these over here. So if you feel like it's grabbing in the middle, that's why it's these metal clips right here. So once we get it off here, our internals mostly filled up with the, relatively speaking, very large for a laptop this size, 60.7 watt-hour battery. Pretty much everything else here is soldered on. We have RAM soldered on board here. We have the M.2 SSD, which is an M.2 socketed NVMe SSD. Ours happens to be a 512 gig SK Hynix SSD installed there. Benchmarks pretty well. I am assuming the Wi-Fi card is soldered on as well. I really can't see any antenna leads. Perhaps these would be in here, unless it's on the other side of the motherboard. That is what it is. And we have a good Wi-Fi 6 card there from Intel, so no worries about that. Two fans, which is very unusual to see in an Ultrabook, and as you've heard about the thermals on this, it really does need those. And our kind of typical Ultrabook size heatsink here, and some heat tape shroud stuff going on over here. So that's the Lenovo IdeaPad Slim 7, and what a nice Ultrabook for the price, particularly if you get that AMD CPU inside, because the performance here is just crazy bonkers, way better than an Ultrabook should ever be. Yes, you got to keep an eye on your thermals and on the heat and stuff like that. The chassis doesn't get that hot to touch, but those core temperatures can get a little bit up there. But overall, nice package, very good full HD display, good set of ports, and did I say Ryzen's fast? I'm Lisa from MobileTechReview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos and hit the notification bell so you know about them too.